You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't. Hi, Chad Branson here, one of the hosts of Share Your Voice, where we talk with top-notch law firms and lawyers about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, delivering tailor-made services to help you accomplish your objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and make sure you're getting the best ROI, your firm needs to have a better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. My guest today is Brian Beckcom, founder of VB Attorneys in Houston, Texas, specializing in personal injury law. Brian is a Texas super lawyer and board-certified personal injury trial lawyer by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. Brian hosts the podcast Lessons from Leaders, featuring esteemed guests. His firm is renowned for litigating against dangerous corporations and insurance companies, securing multimillion-dollar verdicts and settlements. Brian's expertise has earned him recognition in publications like the New York Times and appearances on major networks like ABC News, CNN, and NBC News. He's also a prolific lawyer with 7 books to his name, including How to Win Your Injury Case. Brian, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Great to be here, Chad. I'm really looking forward to this. Your show is awesome, and I'm looking forward to having a nice little discussion today.
Yeah, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much. Hey, tell me as we get started here, how and when did you know that you wanted to become an attorney?
Yeah, great question. There's a very specific answer. I can tell you that I've looked at this, and there is not any lawyers in my family, on my father's side or my mother's side, anywhere that we can find. And my grandfather on my father's side, my uncle on my mother's side, they like to look at the genealogy and the family history. No lawyers. So I come from primarily a family of military officers, enlisted people, teachers, and law enforcement. That's where I come from. But when I was very young, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was 5 years old. My dad was in the Air Force. We were stationed in upstate New York at the time. The diagnosis was done too late, and she ended up dying 5 years later. There was some really, really serious medical malpractice. And of course, I was too young and did not know this at the time, but my dad hired a lawyer to sue the United States of America. I only found this out when I was a little bit older, but he won the case, which anybody that knows anything about suing the government knows how hard that is. And that allowed my dad was a military officer, and then he was a ROTC, a junior ROTC instructor for 20 years. So we didn't have a lot of money. We weren't poor, but we did not have a lot of money. But that lawsuit allowed my brother and I to go to college and law school. My dad took his settlement money and gave it all to Texas A&M, our school, in the form of scholarships, basically. But I saw from a very young age the benefit and what the law could do for people that really needed help. And so that's kind of, and to be quite frank with you, Chad, I didn't think I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in high school or when I was in middle school. That was the farthest thing from my mind. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to be a computer scientist. And so this is in the late 80s, early 90s. I go to Texas A&M, and I didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't even think about being a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers. I mean, I don't have anybody to talk to. So I was like, you know what? These computers are fun. So I ended up studying computer science and also philosophy at Texas A&M. Those were my 2 degrees are in. But people are like, computer science and philosophy, how do you end up in law? And so here's the answer to that question. So I tell people, I say, I spent 4 years at A&M in a computer lab behind a screen with a bunch of dorks, and I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I went to law school, and what do I do now 25 years later? I sit behind a computer screen. But it's an interesting journey, and I truly believe that everybody has a purpose in life. And, I don't think it's one specific purpose, but I think one of the best things you can do is kind of figure out what your calling is and then chase that. And so that's what I've done for the last 25 years. I feel real lucky to be able to do what I'm doing.
I would imagine the cohorts in those 2 programs, computer science and philosophy, were completely different.
Well, I tell you the interesting thing. A lot of people don't know this. The original computer scientists were philosophers, and
Hmm.
in fact, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, all that stuff. Maybe not mathematics, but they used to call it natural philosophy. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And science actually, all sorts of science actually comes out of philosophy. It's not, people think it's the opposite, but people will pose these philosophical questions and then it'll eventually branch off into a scientific discipline. So, for example, physics started with philosophy, it started with natural philosophy, it started with people literally going, uh, why does the sun move that? Why does it move this way and that way? Why when I drop an object like a feather and I drop an object like a bowling ball, do they drop at the same rate? Like those were philosophical questions. So the interesting thing about it, as different as they sound,
Hmm.
they're actually totally compatible. You know the old joke, like if you want to not get a job after graduation, you should be a philosophy major.
Yeah.
I'm actually here to tell you, if you want to work at any job in any field and be super duper disciplined and rigorous in your thinking, philosophy is the way to go. I actually think it's the best degree you could get. So,
Really?
yeah,
That's
for
very
sure.
interesting. Changed my entire perspective on
Yeah.
that. So you
Yeah.
had that you have these two degrees in computer science and philosophy. You go to law school. Take me through kind of your journey then, post law school. How did you get into the legal industry?
Yeah, so I go to law school. I really took to it, and that's because your first year is mainly reading and talking and writing, and I like doing those things. I enjoyed it. I made really good grades. I was on the law review at Texas. I was on editor in chief of the law review. And what happens if you go to a top 20 law school and you're in the top of the class? You get recruited by the top law firms. And that's what happened to me. And I didn't know any different. Again, remember, Chad, no lawyers in the family. So I'm just following along the path. Okay. I'm at Texas Law School. I look around. Everybody that's making good grades is going to big law firms. That's what I got to do. And so that's what I did after law school. I left, graduated from law school in 3 years, and I went to work at the biggest law firm in Texas at the time, a firm called Fulbright and Jaworski. And for 2 years, I defended big corporations, like billion-dollar corporations. And I had one case one time. I was representing a plumbing company. This black plumber, 28, 29 years old, fell off a roof and hurt himself really bad. His name was Eric Legrone. I'll never forget his name. And I went to trial and he beat me. His lawyer did, to the tune of about $500,000. And I remember thinking as I was giving him the settlement check how happy I was for him.
Mm.
And I was going, uh-oh, I'm on the wrong side, So it became clear to me within 2 years that I didn't want to represent what are essentially fictional pieces of paper. That's what insurance companies are. They don't exist. They're just pieces of paper. And they don't care if you win or lose. They're not humans. And it just didn't excite me. And so I immediately was like, I got to get out of here really fast. And I went off, worked for a couple years at a firm, learned a lot of things. And I started my own firm 4 years into the practice. And that's VB Attorneys now. As a matter of fact, it's our 20th anniversary this month. So we've been in practice for 20 years. That's how I got started. And I love what I do. I mean, it's challenging, it's stressful. Sometimes you worry a little bit about certain things, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Wow, congratulations. Congratulations on 20 years. What was thinking 20 years ago, what was the most kind of surprising thing about running your own firm compared to working at a firm when you first started?
Yeah. So they don't teach you how to market in law school. They don't teach you how to run a business in law school. They don't teach you any of that stuff. And so the surprising thing to me was like how I had to learn things other than being a lawyer. So the story I tell, and I actually got this from my marketing mentor. You could have the best bakery in the entire city. You have the best cookies. Everybody loves your cookies. But if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing with being a lawyer. You could be the best trial lawyer in the whole city of Houston. And if you're not a good marketer, it doesn't matter. And it took me a little while to realize that because the way I grew up, I was like, if you're good at what you do, then business and success will come your way. Well, guess what? That's definitely not the way it works. I mean, and it's not just in the law business, Chad.
Hmm.
The best don't always win. Sometimes it's the luckiest. Sometimes it's the most persistent. Sometimes like there's just, uh, if you were at RIM, the Canadian company, working on Blackberries at a certain period of time, you were a genius. And within 2 years, you were an idiot. So sometimes it's just timing. But it made me realize that like running a law firm is nothing like actually practicing law. Those are two different skills. And so that was one of the big things. The other big thing is you can spend all your time on your business and have no time for anything else, your family, your free time, any stuff like that. Or you can have a more balanced life. And I can tell you, this is for sure. I chose the second route. I chose to have a little bit more balanced life. I would have made a lot more money over the last 20 years had I worked 7 days a week, 14-hour days, a lot more money. And you can do that if you own your own law firm, your own business. Like you kind of control your income stream.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what else you also control? You control how much time you spend with your children. You control how much time you spend with your wife or your husband. And so you have a ton of freedom, but sometimes that can cause a little anxiety. The more freedom you have, the more different things you can screw up. So those were kind of the major two things that that kind of surprised me when I opened my law firm.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine. What did you do? I mean, marketing probably is like the channels through which you market have changed so much in the last 20 years. What did you do to kind of get the word out at the time?
First thing I did was I started writing letters to every single person I know that I had like a list of 100 people. I'd literally write a handwritten letter. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Just wanted you to know if you have any business you want to send my way, please keep me in mind. I had somebody tell me when I opened my firm, the number one thing you should not do is be invisible. You got to be in people's minds. And then the third thing I did is I joined a legal marketing group run by a person named Ben Glass called Great Legal Marketing. Matter of fact, I was one of the first members of this thing. And Ben completely changed my entire mindset about everything. And so you're right, things have changed a lot. As a computer science guy, of course, I had one of the first websites up
Mm.
ever. And I had the first website up that was actually generating business. And, fast forward a little bit, then I was one of the first people to have videos up on a regular basis. I actually have a video production studio at my office where I can just walk across the hall and shoot videos and have them up within a couple minutes. Now everybody can do that with a phone. Now we're into the AI stuff, right? So I've been into the AI stuff for about a year and I'm playing around with that. Uh, but yeah, the mechanism by which you transmit your message has changed dramatically, but the fact of transmitting it hasn't. So you're still doing the same thing. You're still telling people, like basically people, and this again applies across all businesses. You have somebody has a problem or a need, and you want to be there to fulfill it. And in our business, uh, you don't know when that'll be. So, like an estate lawyer knows when people get older, they're going to have estate planning needs. Like an 18-year-old doesn't have estate planning needs, right? And a transactional lawyer is going to know if two companies are coming together to merge, they're going to have documentary needs. But what I do, I mean, I don't, anybody could get hurt at any time. So, and then once that happens, there's a very limited window in which they make a decision about what to do. And so some people call it look in the yellow pages. I don't think they do that anymore, but, or the billboards or the TVs. Now it's the internet. And so you need to be where people are. And that's kind of the basic strategy. But again, the point is like the distribution channels have changed, but the messaging and the purpose has.
So you've probably been in some, I'm sure every case that you're in is a challenge in its own way. What has been like a particularly memorably challenging case that you've taken on during your career?
Yeah, I won't give you anybody the details of this, but I'm in the middle of it right now.
Mm.
I've done some multi 8-figure, 9-figure cases. I've done some super cool cases like the Captain Phillips case, Tom Hanks, the Somali boat case where I was on New York Times, Dateline. But I'm working on something right now that is absolutely unbelievable. And I can't get into too many details, but I can tell you that the skills you develop as a trial lawyer or as a litigator apply to anything. And so I'll give you a little bit of a taste of it. I'm involved in something right now where there's some illegal activity at the various highest levels some Texas institutions. And I don't want to get into too many details, but the skills that I've developed have enabled me to investigate this and find things and pursue strategies and use the legal system in a way that nobody else can do. So for people that are listening, and I think there's other fields of law where this applies too, but the point is like if you're trained as a litigator or a trial lawyer, you're basically trained as a professional investigator. And that applies to a lot of different fields. Like, so for example, if you're the CEO of a big corporation or something, but you have like a litigator or a trial lawyer that's working for you and there's something fishy going on, that's a person you want to go look into it, right? Because what do we really do as trial lawyers? We seek the truth. Like we seek the truth. We use the discovery mechanisms to do that. And then there's a picture. And we have to take all these disparate facts and all this evidence and we got to put it into a story. That's really what we do. And so that's what I've been doing lately. And this, you're going to see this, I predict, on national news fairly soon.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
Stay tuned.
yeah, definitely. So what kind of investigative skills do you feel like you have at your advantage? You know, I think of a lawyer as a good debater, a good arguer, you know, somebody who can prove a point. Maybe a journalist is more of an investigator, but what in terms of being a lawyer, what kind of investigative skills do you have at your advantage?
So I know how to use the rules. So in litigation, it would be the rules of civil procedure. In an administrative proceeding, it would be the administrative rules. And I know how to be strategic and tactical. Like I know I've got a certain goal in this situation or a set of goals. I know how to develop a plan to get to those goals. And maybe most importantly, I'm persistent. And so, for example, in this case I'm working on right now, I've been lied to repeat. I've asked for certain documents and I've been lied to repeatedly. But then most people just go away. Okay, that's what you said. I'm not going to follow up. But I never do that. Like I'm so persistent that I will literally not quit until I get what I want, period. And that has that's got a lot of benefits, that persistence. So for instance, I've uncovered some bombshell documents in this case I'm working on right now that I never would have uncovered had I not pushed and been persistent and been persistent and been persistent. I mean, like when you deal with billion-dollar insurance companies every day like I do, they don't give it up easy. Like they fight everything and they don't want to give you the good documents. They don't want to give you the good information. So it's great training about how to be persistent. I mean, as a matter of fact, I should have said that first. Persistence is the most important thing I've learned.
Mm. What's your favorite part about being a lawyer?
Being able to help people.
What are you what's your proudest moment?
I'm doing it right now.
Oh yeah, nice.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
How you mentioned that you were a military, grew up in a military family. You were like a military brat, I guess they call it. How has that influenced your perspective and your values?
I think when you grow up in a military family, it changes you in a couple ways. So, for example, I think I lived 6 different places from the time I was born until the time I graduated from high school, which that's not the best. It's not the normal thing for a young adult nowadays. But you know what it did? And I didn't like moving from, making a bunch of friends and then 2 years later I got to move. But you know what it did do? I got friends all over the world now. And it enabled me to like meet people easily and
Mm.
to, like I don't know if this is a dated reference, but if you looked at my group of friends, it looks like a Benetton catalog. Like I've got friends from every single walk of life, every single race, religion, color, sex, you name it. Like it's awesome. And so, and the military's like that too, by the way. The military is like a melting pot. And the other thing I think it teaches you is it teaches you a certain set of values that really don't change, things like discipline, honor, loyalty, integrity, service, stuff like that. So, I saw my dad not talking about that stuff, but living it. Like he wasn't saying you got to do this stuff. He was just doing that stuff. And So, my dad woke up at 5:30 every morning and ran 3.2 miles, did 120 push-ups and 120 sit-ups, and he did that every single day for 20 years without a single break. So when you see that kind of thing, like it can't help but like kind of get into your bones a little bit. So, but those are the two big things that I learned from the military background.
Yeah, I would imagine. So you go from that to then double majoring in computer science and philosophy. Has that background in computer science and philosophy influenced your approach to law?
For sure, it's influenced it in a lot of different ways, and mainly like as from a practical standpoint, like especially nowadays doing what I do, I have cases where cell phones, computers, photographs, there's a lot of engineering and recreating accidents and incidents and stuff. And when I go depose a mechanical engineer who's done all this fancy accident reconstruction, I actually know what he's talking about. Like if he says something wrong from the science standpoint, I know he's saying something wrong. Or if he's exaggerating his conclusion, oh, the coefficient of friction says this and that means this and that and blah blah blah. And like I know if he's bullshitting me, basically. So that's been helpful. And then also, of course, like we talked about earlier, from a marketing standpoint, being able to use the internet effectively. I mean, you ought to see my social media, my YouTube, my website. It's fairly robust, and so that's helped a lot from the philosophical. So the philosophy. So my primary focus was on ethics and morality. So stuff like utilitarianism and Kantianism and existentialism and some of the older Greek philosophers. Like, how does it mean to live a good life, and what is good and bad and stuff like that? Well, isn't that just what the law is about? Like, isn't that what we're doing as lawyers? Is like the criminal law basically is a value judgment that our society has made that this particular conduct we don't agree with philosophically. Or like in the civil court, what we say is if you hurt somebody and it's your fault, our values say that you should make it right, that it's not just enough to say I'm sorry. It's like, the old story, the kid throws a baseball through the window and breaks it. It's not enough to say I'm sorry. You got to offer to pay for it too, right? Because
Mhm.
otherwise you're not really sorry. So the philosophy, I think law is philosophy. Law is basically like this is our ethics as a society.
What is your approach to settling cases versus going to trial?
I want to settle every single case. And I tell my clients that you're better off settling the case because they call it trial for a reason because it's hard and it's trying. It's not fun. It's not over in 20 minutes like it is on TV. And plus, if you win, then you don't necessarily see anything for years because there's an appellate process. So I tell all my clients the best thing that can happen is you can settle your case. And most of my cases settle because I pick good cases and I investigate them thoroughly. But on the flip side of that is I am board certified, and so is my partner, personal injury trial law, which means you have to have a certain number of trials, you got to get judges and all this blah blah blah. So if they don't offer a fair settlement, I will see you in court tomorrow if we need to. And I think the combination of being willing to settle for reasonable, fair numbers, but being prepared to go to trial if you don't, that's the killer combo. And I've been doing this long enough. My partner's been doing this long enough that all the insurance companies we deal with, all the major corporations, they know. They know we'll go to trial if they don't offer us a reasonable amount. Whereas a lot of lawyers, I hate to say this, but it's true. A lot of lawyers will take anything that's offered, basically. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. They might be afraid of going to trial. They might not have any money. They might not know what they're doing. There's a lot of different reasons for that. But the point is like that happens way too often. Like I hear about cases where somebody settled a case for a certain amount. And I'm like, man, golly, I feel sorry for that person. They would have had a better lawyer. They'd have gotten a lot better result. So
You talked
anyway,
about having the video studio in your firm and learning AI. I was going to ask you what role technology has played in evolving your legal practice, but specifically AI. How are you kind of incorporating that into what you do, and how do you kind of stay abreast of everything that goes into that? It seems to change all the time.
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about is large language models when we're talking about AI as it relates to law right now. So just to use the terms properly, people say like Chat GPT. Well, Chat GPT, that's like saying Toyota, okay, when
Hmm.
what you mean is car. And so there's a lot of different Chat GPTs. There's a lot of different large language models. What is a large language model fundamentally? A large language model fundamentally is a computer program that studies a lot of data and then uses that to predict what the next words will be. It's a prediction machine, essentially. And so it's not really intelligent in the sense we usually mean that. So the reason I'm saying that from the get go is you got to be careful about how you use it. You have to understand the limitations of these large language models. But with that said, it's remarkable what they can do. So, for example, when I'm done with a deposition now, within 10 seconds, I have a complete AI summary. And I also have a suggested list of follow ups, and I can put together a timeline. I can draft discovery request in 30 seconds, and I have to redraft them and all that stuff. I can summarize things. One of the things I like to do in my motion practice often is I'll have a quote at the top of that is supposed to be germane to what's being talked about. So I'll type into these large language models, give me 5 different potential quotes from great literature about this topic. So to just give you a concrete example, I had a case where I was trying to make the point that if you fail to preserve evidence, that's the same as destroying it. And so I asked the AI, give me 5 quotes from literature about that idea that would work good. And I ended up getting a great quote by Salman Rushdie, actually, that was at the very top of the paper. So for stuff like that, it's amazing. It's really stupid right now, for the most part, when it comes to researching cases. And it also, I find this incredibly ironic, it's bad at math. So large language models can't do basic math. Now they're fixing that a little bit. And if you understood kind of what goes on underneath the hood, then you would understand why that is. But like it literally, there's large language models that can't do basic arithmetic.
Interesting.
But in terms of like, and again, if you understand like the fundamentals of what goes on, you understand why I can do this. But in terms of like taking a large volume of information and like plugging it together and looking for commonalities and differences and stuff, it's amazing at that. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Hey, a couple more questions for you. What motivated you to create the Lessons from Leaders podcast, and what do you kind of take away from it?
Sitting in my house in quarantine, not doing anything. Everybody's bitching and moaning online. Everybody's real mean. It looks terrible. And I was like, you know what? I want to get some positivity out. I know a lot of people. I was sitting out on my back porch with my wife drinking wine, and I said, nobody's going to want to listen to Brian Beckcom's podcast. I got to get a good name and a good subject. And she said, how about Lessons from Leaders? And so we went from there. And so the idea behind the podcast is just to feature positive leaders, people that it's not a political podcast. We're not bitching and moaning all the time. We're talking about positive stuff. So what motivated me was just to get a little bit of positivity out, basically.
How can people find? Is it you just find it wherever you get your podcasts?
Yeah, just it's on everything. It's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all the other podcasts. Just look up Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. It'll pop up.
Okay, awesome. One more question, but first, tell me how people can find out more about VB Attorneys.
VBattorneys.com. Brian Beckcom Lawyer on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And really, all you got to do is type Brian Beckcom, and you'll just. It's actually kind of embarrassing how much stuff comes up.
Okay, last question for you. If a young person came to you and said that they thought it would be really great to become an attorney, what advice would you give them that they wouldn't learn in law school? Maybe that they would only learn having had your experience.
Do you like to read and write? If the answer to that is yes, then you'll probably be a good lawyer. If you don't like to read and write, you should do something else.
Perfect.
That's
Perfect.
kind of the bottom line. Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds good. Hey, Brian, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for all of your insights, your stories, and your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chad. Great time. Appreciate it, man.
So long, everybody. Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.